They say money can't buy happiness, but growing up without enough often teaches a different truth, that scarcity etches itself deeper than any bank account ever could. You might think poverty only shapes what you own, but it shapes how you see the world, how you trust, how you imagine safety, and even how you love. In homes where meals were uncertain, silence often carried more weight than words. Where shoes were patched, dreams were folded carefully to avoid wear. And in those quiet, invisible corners of childhood, resilience was born, but so were invisible scars, hidden from even those closest to you. Why do some who grew up with little carry an unshakable drive, while others feel an endless weight of doubt? Why does the memory of scarcity linger long after abundance arrives? This is a journey through the inner lives of those shaped by poverty, not the statistics, but the psychology beneath the surface. Let's begin. From a young age, the world of a child growing up in poverty is defined not by what is present, but by what is absent. Empty shelves, worn shoes, quiet rooms where conversations about needs are avoided. These form a subtle curriculum of lessons that leave lasting imprints. Scarcity is not just material, it is emotional. It whispers, even in the smallest moments, that security is fragile, that love may come with conditions, that comfort is always temporary. Children learn to measure the world in survival. A full stomach today is more certain than dreams for tomorrow. They become quiet observers, cataloging the rhythms of shortage, the patterns of restraint, and the invisible rules of negotiation that adults may not even realize they are enforcing. In these spaces, fear is a companion, and vigilance is a skill as natural as breathing. And yet, amid this shadow, there is another lesson, almost hidden: resilience. To navigate uncertainty, children invent subtle strategies, small victories that allow them to feel a sense of control. They ration hope like water, learning early that even tiny victories are precious. But these lessons, while adaptive, carry an unseen weight. They can later manifest as hyper-vigilance, perfectionism, or an inability to trust abundance when it arrives. Consider the quiet child who hesitates before asking for more, even when need is real, or the teenager who hoards resources not from greed but from a memory of emptiness that still echoes in the chest. These behaviors are not flaws, they are survival mechanisms crystallized in the mind. Yet they are also reminders of an internalized scarcity that can shape self-image, relationships, and emotional rhythms well into adulthood. How does one reconcile the duality of scarcity, the shadow that lingers and the resilience that glows? Recognition begins here, noticing the subtle ways poverty leaves marks on the psyche and understanding that these marks are neither shameful nor weak. They are a testament to adaptation, to navigating a world that was often unforgiving, and to the quiet courage of living through absence while still dreaming. In these shadows, the mind begins to map its first boundaries, its first fears, its first defenses, and while these early experiences are invisible to most, they set the stage for every choice, every hesitation, every hope that comes later. Poverty is not only felt in moments of hunger or want, it seeps into the rhythm of daily life, quietly shaping thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. For a child, each day carries lessons in survival that go far beyond material scarcity. The world teaches them to calculate risk, to weigh trust, and to question permanence. Every missed meal, every denied request, every glance that measures worth against what is possible leaves a mark, forming the roots of enduring psychological patterns. In homes where resources are tight, children often learn to read the emotional climate before words are spoken. A mother's sigh, a father's tense pause, a sibling's sudden withdrawal, they become signals to navigate. Over time, the mind develops a delicate map of anticipation, learning to expect limitation, disappointment, or sudden change. This is not mere anxiety, it is an adaptive intelligence honed by necessity. Yet these roots grow in shadows. Children internalize messages about value, control, and self-worth. If safety is inconsistent, they may begin to believe that love or attention must be earned. If opportunities are rare, ambition becomes both a survival tool and a source of inner tension. The patterns that develop are subtle but pervasive: hyper-vigilance, self-restraint, careful calculation before speaking or acting, and a heightened sensitivity to social cues. Even moments of joy carry caution, as if abundance is always temporary. These psychological roots explain why adults who grew up in scarcity often carry a dual nature. On one hand, there is a remarkable resilience, ingenuity in problem-solving, empathy for struggle, and an ability to persevere when others falter. On the other hand, there is a persistent wariness, an undercurrent of fear, self-doubt, or hesitation in the face of opportunity. Every decision is touched by the echoes of early life. Consider a person walking into a room filled with abundance for the first time. The eyes may scan for what might be missing rather than celebrating what is present. A promotion, a gift, or a moment of comfort may trigger unease, not because of ingratitude, but because scarcity shaped the lens through which the world is seen. Understanding these roots is not about assigning blame. It is about tracing the invisible threads of experience that shape how people think, feel, and respond. Every pattern has an origin. Every hesitation tells a story. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward gentle awareness, not to erase them, but to understand the mind that grew in the shadow of scarcity and the quiet wisdom it carries. The human brain is remarkably adaptive. It does not simply endure scarcity, it organizes itself around it. For those who grew up in poverty, the architecture of the mind is quietly shaped by the demands of survival, long before conscious thought takes hold. Neural pathways are strengthened by repeated experiences. Uncertainty becomes expectation. Vigilance becomes default. And every decision is filtered through a lens honed for risk and reward. Scientific studies show that chronic early stress, common in environments marked by scarcity, alters the development of areas responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and threat perception. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes hyper-responsive, while the prefrontal cortex, which governs planning and judgment, often develops in a world of constant adaptation rather than calm deliberation. This is why someone may react with caution or hesitation in moments that feel safe to others, or why planning for the distant future can feel abstract and uncertain. Yet, biology tells only half the story. The mind is also sculpted by experience and interpretation. Growing up with limited resources teaches patterns of prediction. If something valuable appears, it must be protected. If comfort arises, it may vanish. Risk-taking is weighed meticulously. Relationships are approached cautiously, and even joy can carry an undercurrent of fear. These are not weaknesses, they are intelligent adaptations. The brain learned to survive in a world that was unpredictable, and it continues to operate in that framework long after material scarcity has lifted. This architecture explains many of the contradictions we see. People who grew up in poverty often demonstrate extraordinary focus and problem-solving abilities. They notice details others overlook, navigate complex social systems, and persevere where many give up. And yet, they may also experience self-doubt, perfectionism, or difficulty trusting abundance. Their mind has been trained to anticipate loss, even when loss is unlikely, creating an internal tension between capability and caution. Understanding this architecture invites a gentle curiosity. It asks us to see behaviors not as flaws or limitations, but as evidence of the mind's creative resilience. Every hesitation, every instinct to hold back, every meticulous calculation is a window into the survival strategies forged in childhood. And when we recognize these patterns, we can start to perceive both the wisdom and the burden they carry, insight that forms the foundation for the chapters to come. Even after scarcity has passed, its echoes linger, quietly shaping desires, choices, and emotions. People who grew up in poverty often carry an internal tension, the pull of ambition and possibility on one side, and the weight of doubt and caution on the other. This is the invisible inheritance of scarcity, a set of internal conflicts that can feel like a silent battle, waged in thought, in instinct, in the quiet corners of the heart. Consider a person who has earned a new opportunity. There is excitement, a spark of possibility, but alongside it, a whisper. Will this last? Am I deserving? What if I fail? These conflicting impulses are not arbitrary. They are deeply rooted in early experiences where stability was never guaranteed. The mind learned to prepare for disappointment, to anticipate loss, to measure trust carefully. And even in safety, these patterns persist, creating resistance to abundance, recognition, or intimacy. Relationships, too, carry this tension. Trust is often tentative. Generosity may feel risky. Vulnerability is measured. The fear of loss can turn connection into calculation, and the instinct to protect oneself can appear as emotional distance. For those observing from the outside, it may look like hesitation or aloofness, but inside, it is the echo of lessons learned in childhood, where every emotional risk was weighed against potential scarcity. And yet, resistance is not weakness. It is an adaptation. It is the mind's way of holding on to what it once could not take for granted. But it is also a source of quiet struggle, a friction that can make joy feel fleeting, success feel precarious, and comfort feel unfamiliar. Recognizing this inner conflict is the first step towards understanding that these behaviors are both survival mechanisms and barriers, shaped by context, not by flaw. This chapter is an invitation to witness these tensions without judgment, to notice the hesitation before celebration, the wariness before trust, the self-protection before openness. These are the internal echoes of scarcity, resonating long after the environment has changed. And in seeing them clearly, one begins to differentiate between the mind that adapted to survive and the life that now asks for presence, for trust, for ease. The struggle between instinct and opportunity is not a sign of failure. It is evidence of adaptation, and also the first doorway to gentle awareness. It is here, in this friction between what was learned and what is possible, that the seeds of insight begin to take root. There comes a moment when the mind begins to notice its own echoes, when the habits, fears, and hesitations forged in scarcity become visible, not as flaws, but as familiar scripts repeated over decades. For those who grew up in poverty, this awareness often arrives quietly, without fanfare. It may appear as a thought in the middle of the night. Why do I hold back when opportunity is in front of me? Or as a subtle feeling during success. Why do I fear I do not deserve this? Breaking patterns does not mean erasing the past. Scarcity shaped ingenuity, resilience, and empathy. But the same experiences can also produce invisible constraints, repetitive cycles of caution, mistrust, or self-doubt. Recognizing these patterns is the first act of conscious freedom, noticing the ways the mind responds automatically, and tracing these responses back to their origins in childhood survival. The turning point is often paradoxical. It is not an overwhelming insight or a single breakthrough, but a gentle, repeated noticing of oneself, a pause before reacting, a quiet reflection after resisting abundance. This is when the mind begins to understand that hesitation is learned, that fear is often a memory, and that responses can shift when awareness is present. Even the smallest recognition, I am not my fear, I am its witness, can start to unravel cycles that once felt inevitable. Breaking patterns also involves witnessing the subtle tension between desire and caution. A person may yearn for stability, intimacy, or success, yet recoil instinctively. Awareness allows them to differentiate between instinctual survival strategies and choices that now serve a present reality. It is a delicate practice, honoring the wisdom of past adaptations while allowing space for new behaviors, new trust, and new experiences. This phase is rarely dramatic. It is a slow unfolding, a gradual rewiring of expectation and perception. Moments of discomfort may arise as the mind experiments with generosity, risk, or emotional openness, and in those moments, self-compassion becomes crucial, the recognition that patterns existed for a reason, that hesitation was once protective, and that shifting them is both courageous and natural. Breaking patterns is less about changing who you are and more about observing who you have become through scarcity and beginning to live consciously beyond it.
It is the gentle awareness that while the shadows of childhood may linger, the present allows choices unshaped by fear, and in that awareness, the mind begins to glimpse freedom.
Healing for those shaped by poverty rarely arrives as a single moment of revelation. It comes in fragments, quiet, small, almost imperceptible gestures that gradually reshape the mind and the heart. A consistent meal, a safe space, a trustworthy relationship, each becomes a grain of sand building a new foundation under the old, worn structures of survival. For someone whose early years were defined by scarcity, trust is cultivated slowly, comfort must be learned, and joy allowed, one fragment at a time. It might be as simple as sitting without vigilance, letting a laugh linger without guilt, or receiving kindness without calculating its cost. These moments accumulate, forming a mosaic of safety that can gradually counterbalance decades of internalized caution. Psychologically, healing involves acknowledging the resilience embedded in scarcity while gently releasing the patterns it imposed. Hyper-vigilance can be softened, perfectionism eased, and fear of abundance mitigated, not by force, but through repeated experiences of reliability, warmth, and presence. The mind begins to rewire itself, learning that not every risk leads to loss, that not every offer hides a hidden price, and that security can exist as a lived reality rather than a fleeting hope. Relationships become a subtle laboratory for this work, allowing vulnerability, practicing patience with oneself, and witnessing moments of trust pay dividends that are invisible at first but profound over time. Each small act of self-compassion and external connection plants seeds of new psychological pathways, fragment by fragment, until the mind learns that safety and comfort are possible, even deserved. Yet, healing does not erase memory. The echoes of scarcity remain, like shadows on a wall. But awareness transforms them from obstacles into guides, reminders of the strength developed in adversity, of the quiet courage cultivated in absence. Fragments of healing can coexist with memories of struggle, creating a richer, more compassionate understanding of self. In this stage, the emphasis is not on perfection or total transformation. It is on noticing, on valuing the small acts of care, on allowing the mind to integrate experience gradually. It is the recognition that growth often happens imperceptibly, in pauses, in moments of stillness, and in the gentle unfolding of trust over time. Healing in fragments is not linear, but cumulative. Each quiet victory, each act of presence, self-acceptance, or relational safety becomes a step toward living fully, not just surviving. And in honoring these fragments, the mind slowly learns that life can hold both the memory of scarcity and the possibility of serenity.
Even after years of change, the mind carries echoes. For those who grew up in poverty, the past is not erased. It resonates quietly, shaping perception, instinct, and emotional rhythm. These echoes are neither shameful nor limiting. They are the imprint of survival, the trace of resilience forged in absence. And to acknowledge them is not to dwell in scarcity, but to honor the life that once required vigilance, resourcefulness, and courage. Walking through the present, one may notice these echoes in subtle ways: hesitation before claiming space, an instinct to over-prepare, a careful weighing of generosity, or a lingering doubt that joy will endure. These are not failures, they are reflections of the mind's remarkable adaptability, reminders that early life required alertness, caution, and self-protection. And yet, awareness allows them to be observed without being dictated by them, to be felt without being trapped by them. Reflection also illuminates the quiet gifts of growing up with less. People who experienced scarcity often develop empathy that runs deep, noticing others' struggles with insight and sensitivity. They cultivate patience and endurance, learning that small victories can be monumental, and they often possess a subtle wisdom, an understanding that life is rarely linear, that abundance can coexist with hardship, and that worth is not measured by material possession. There is a profound poetry in these contrasts, the interplay between shadow and glow, fear and resilience, memory and presence. Recognizing this interplay is a form of gentle liberation. It allows one to see scarcity as a teacher, not a jailer, to see old patterns as guides, not chains, and to perceive the past as a landscape of survival, rich with lessons for the mind and heart.
As we reflect on these echoes, the goal is not to rewrite the past, but to witness it, to honor the endurance that carried through difficulty, to validate the feelings that linger, and to allow insight to emerge from understanding rather than judgment. In this awareness, healing continues quietly and profoundly in the folds of memory, in the pauses of the present, and in the gentle shaping of the future. The mind shaped by poverty is complex, resilient, and alive. Its echoes are reminders of struggle, endurance, and the subtle beauty of survival. And in witnessing them, there is a space for quiet reflection, deep understanding, and the tender recognition of the self as both survivor and observer.